Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Andy Ruiz Jr., the former unified champion, returns this weekend against former title challenger Chris Arreola. This will be a pay-per-view on Fox. So this fight, it marks 18 months out of the ring for Ruiz, coming to an end. And actually for Chris Arreola, the 40-year-old, it's even longer. He's been out of the ring since August 2019, so over 18 months. But for Ruiz, good to see him back. The former unified champion who lost his belts December 2019, sat out all of 2020. And it's actually a little bit of a mystery why that they didn't have this fight towards the end of last year when it was meant to happen. It sort of went quiet, but now we have it May 1st, 2021. And I know for some the pay-per-view element just sort of sours this fight just a little bit, but in terms of the matchup, it should be fun. These guys have been talked about as a potential sort of clash for years and years and years. And this is probably the last time that it can actually happen, especially given that Arreola, pretty long in the tooth now, 40 years old. But he will come to fight. He will know what's expected of him, and his sort of all-action style generally delivers a fun fight for fans. So I'm expecting that this one here will be full of a lot of punches and probably Arreola getting pieced up at times. Remembering Andy Ruiz Jr. is effectively a front foot counterpuncher, likes to work off what you give him. So I think we will see Ruiz Jr. lighting Chris Arreola up, but also Arreola probably having moments of success himself. Ruiz is not exactly a defensive maestro, but he's probably not as hittable as Arreola, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. But one of the things that's been a sort of a focus for this fight, and it sort of helped build a little bit of hype for the fight, is not just the return of Ruiz, but the shape that Ruiz is going to be returning in. I think we all remember Andy Ruiz Jr. coming in at 283 pounds for the rematch with Anthony Joshua, looking a bit sort of flat-footed and having few ideas to sort of cut the ring and the distance down in that fight. Really didn't have any answers, but he's not going to have that sort of problem in this fight with Arreola. It will be a phone booth type fight. But back to the weight loss. It is one of these things that, I think just he should be coming in lighter, because as a heavyweight that's only about 6 foot, coming in at 280 pounds makes zero sense. And he has been, the weight that he says he's going to be weighing in at, 255 pounds or thereabouts, he's familiar with that. That was his weight for his title fight with Joseph Parker at the back end of 2016. So I just want to just sort of clear that up for some people, because it does sort of seem to be that people are like, Ruiz is coming in the best shape of his career. It's something we've never seen before. If it's 255, we have seen it before. It's a weight he's looked good at, he's comfortable at, clearly, in that they've been targeting. So he could have been actually a little bit less than that in training camp, as he was sort of shedding some of the pounds. But I expect, as he's been tapering in the past week or two, that he's coming up to where his fight weight is, which he says is going to be roughly there or thereabouts at 255. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a little bit heavier. Sometimes, in the final week or two, these heavyweights can put on 5, 10, 15 pounds. We've seen a lot of heavyweights do this before. And here's a shot, actually. So this was in ring against Anthony Joshua. So bear in mind, he was 283 at the weigh-in. This is a mid sort of action fight, shot at 2019 December. And on the right-hand side, obviously, from April 2021. I do actually think that people, besides Ruiz clearly sucking in his stomach, and don't tell me he's not, he is, because what's going to happen, and we've seen this with guys like Sergey Kuzmin, you see these shots, the open workout, the weigh-in, and you go, okay, look, actually looking in pretty decent condition. And then they come into the ring, they've got their shorts on, or ready to roll, that sort of stuff. They're hydrated. They don't have to worry about, because sometimes some of these heavyweights are a little bit vain about the weigh-in. They ended up sort of boiling down a little bit more, and they come into the ring, and you do see that they've got this muffin top, and you're like, but that looks completely different to what I just saw the other day at the weigh-in or promotional shots a la this one. So don't be surprised when Ruiz is actually in the ring if you're like, well, he doesn't really look too different, but because that's actually not too uncommon for that to sort of happen. But 255 for a guy who's about 6 foot, that's still quite heavy. So don't expect Ruiz to look like a twig out there when he does actually enter the ring. But it is a weight that he's familiar with. And I think that's one of the things that Eddie Reynoso will actually be wanting to sort of tease out of this new relationship. He's training Ruiz for the first fight. They won't want to sort of push the boat out too much in terms of what they're doing in terms of technique and other bits and pieces, and also his body, because if he had have dropped down drastically below, say his career low, which is still relatively high for a guy of his height, 244, if he had come in at like 230 or something, maybe there would have been questions about punch resistance and potentially other impacts that could have sort of beset him, by dropping down that low, especially in a period of 6 months, 9 months, that sort of thing, because he had been actually as high as 310 pounds. That's from Ruiz's own mouth. But this weight loss sort of situation has been one of these things that has helped to build the fight because people are interested. Ruiz, obviously had that very good upset win over Anthony Joshua, then threw it all away the next fight. He's come down from 310 pounds, so roughly he's going to be down by about 55 pounds, something there or thereabouts. And another angle for this fight that's helped sort of build interest is this new relationship, which I've already just sort of mentioned, with Eddie Reynoso. And so this is, I see this as a bit of a trial basis. They're just sort of, seeing what each other is about. And there's also the sort of added benefit that he's in the same training camp with Canelo Alvarez, who is clearly the top dog in world boxing at the moment. And he will be the leader of that camp and won't put up with any of Andy Ruiz BS if he does decide to slack. And as I've said in previous videos, I don't expect any sort of motivation issues to sort of come with this fight, because Ruiz has got that fire burning after obviously throwing his belts away and losing to Joshua, not really sort of firing too many shots in that fight, and obviously didn't do himself any favors by coming in overweight and just expecting that he was going to have the goods to beat Joshua no matter what. And admitting that he didn't really train hard and he was blowing off training sessions, disrespected those belts. So I think a lot of people are like, yeah, okay, well, Ruiz needs to go back to the drawing board, prove that he's ready for another title shot by getting some good wins. And this fight doesn't necessarily prove that. Effectively, even Ruiz has sort of said before he has a real tough fight, he wanted a tune-up. And this fight was effectively that tune-up. And it still is. And I know a lot of people are sort of a bit rankled that it's on pay-per-view, but it is what it is. It's at a slightly reduced cost. And I think part of the reason this fight was delayed was obviously the monetary demands. But also PBC have to spread out their pay-per-view events. They can't have too many in a short period of time. And they've probably decided that push this back, it's slightly reduced, but also, the market will end up dictating what Ruiz will get paid, because I'm sure he has expectations about what he wants, and maybe he will get a rude awakening from the level of interest that's actually here for this fight if it's on pay-per-view. But in terms of his opponent, Arreola, probably some of the best shape, if not the best shape of his career, at least from the outside looking in. He's been working with new trainer Joe Goosen. He's been whipping Arreola into good shape, and that actually has me questioning, is this fight going to be a little bit tougher for Andy Ruiz Jr. than originally I think me and many other people may have thought? I'm more leaning towards going to the deeper rounds, or possibly even to a decision. I had sort of thought that maybe this would, originally at least, would be some sort of firefight for 6 or 7 rounds, Arreola taking a pasting, ultimately getting stopped or retiring just through sheer exhaustion, because it will be one of these fights where there could be, if it goes the full distance, 1,500 punches or something like that thrown. Probably, more than half of those will be thrown by Arreola, who likes to let his hands go, come forward and just sort of make things happen. But he is open to being countered. He is open to being hit and hurt and taken out. Ruiz Jr.'s got good pop. As we saw against Anthony Joshua, there is sometimes the concussive power. Arreola's got a decent set of whiskers, so I guess we'll sort of see. I mean, I think more than likely it will be a case that Ruiz starts to break him down over rounds and then stops him, or this actually just goes to the distance. I'm sort of more leaning to the distance now, given the commitment, dedication that we've seen from Arreola coming in shape for this fight. I mean, he knows it's last chance saloon. I mean, I don't see Arreola winning this fight. I don't see him stopping Andy Ruiz Jr., but I guess it's heavyweight boxing. Stranger things have happened. But I am glad to see that he is not just phoning it in the on the training front, at least, and that he's going to be coming in and looking good. And, you know, who knows if Arreola starts to wear down Andy Ruiz Jr., maybe an upset is in the offing, but I'm not expecting it, but you can't rule these things out entirely. This fight does sort of have, you know, Andy Ruiz Jr. win written all over it, especially with the dedication that he's been showing in training camp. He is looking like a new man compared with 18 months ago in terms of the condition. He's with a new trainer. He seems to have that fire in the belly and not as much food in the belly compared to some of these previous training camps. 283 was never a good look. Even when he beat Anthony Joshua, he was at 268, and that was still quite high. And I think that gave him the false sense of security that he could be any weight and do anything and beat anyone. And that's not always going to work, having that extra rubble. Andy Ruiz Jr.'s got really fast hands, but doesn't necessarily have that, you know, faster feet. So having all that extra weight to sort of haul around is not going to be helping him, especially with his footwork, foot speed in particular. And I think, you know, for him being at a weight, you know, more around 250-ish is better. I mean, I think he would even look more impressive around 240. And then some people might go, oh, that's never going to happen. He has been as low as 244. That was earlier in his career. I think if he does get down to something like that, that could be, you know, really unstoppable territory with some of the hand speed in particular, which, you know, when you do have, when you're hauling around extra poundage and rubble for no reason, it does kind of have an effect. But then again, I mean, he may argue, and he sort of did actually for that first fight with Joshua, because remembering he was 262 for the Dimitrenko fight, and then he said for the Joshua fight, 268, he felt that he needed to have that little bit of extra sort of poundage to help with the sort of snap on his punches. You can take that either one of two ways, that, okay, maybe he was right, that he felt strong, or it's just an excuse, he just didn't train as hard as maybe he could have. And for that one, that was only 6 weeks' notice. So, yeah, it wasn't necessarily ideal preparations, but he got the right result there the first time around. Anyway, what do you think about this fight? Who's going to win? I know some people don't love the fact that it's pay-per-view, but it's good to see Andy Ruiz Jr. back. I'm expecting a win, either sort of later round stoppage, maybe a retirement from Arreola. That's happened before in his career. Or it goes all 12 rounds. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.